Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines of this hour. The Kremlin says US brokered talks on the war in Ukraine will take place in Geneva on February the 17th and 18th. Moscow says the delegation will be led by Vladimir Medinsky, who headed earlier rounds of failed negotiations. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio calls this a defining moment as he leads the US delegation to the Munich Security Conference. Ukraine, China and Iran talks are on the agenda amid strains over transatlantic ties. Saudi Arabia is reportedly scaling back plans for 81 luxury Red Sea resorts by 2030, according to sources familiar with the project. Developer Red Sea Global denies a downsize, but sources say construction could halt in 2026, affecting hundreds of jobs. Brussels says China's duties of up to 11.7% on certain EU dairy products are unwarranted and unjustified. The European Union notes the final rates are lower than earlier proposals, but says the 5-year measures remain a concern. French President Emmanuel Macron calls for mandatory electoral bans for officials guilty of anti-Semitic, racist or discriminatory acts. He says the government and parliament will strengthen penalties, speaking at a commemoration for a victim of anti-Semitic violence. Bangladesh's opposition BNP wins a landslide general election, returning to power after nearly 2 decades. The victory sets up Tariq Rahman to become Prime Minister as the country emerges from months of unrest and economic disruption. 3 brothers, including an 8-year-old, are killed near Ukraine's eastern front line, while a Russian drone strike kills 1 and injured 6 at a Black Sea port near Odessa. Officials say the boy's mother and grandmother are also wounded, and energy infrastructure in Odessa is badly damaged. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney will attend a vigil in Tumbler Ridge, British Columbia, where 9 people were killed in a mass school shooting. The visit comes as the country grieves one of its worst gun attacks in recent years. We start this hour in Europe, and at the Munich Security Conference, the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte and German officials have announced heightened European defence efforts. Von der Leyen has noted the significance of a programme within the €800 billion defence plan, focusing primarily on joint procurement projects between EU member states under the SAFE initiative. Let's listen in to her statements.
Parteiübergreifend haben wir aus dem Bündnis, aber auch von anderer Seite seit Jahren gehört, Europa muss mehr tun für Verteidigung. Und das ist richtig. Europa muss unabhängiger werden, muss mehr tun für seine Verteidigung. Ein starkes Europa bedeutet auch eine starke NATO. Und das ist der Mindset, den ich in die Europäische Union getragen habe. Im letzten Jahr haben wir mehr für Verteidigung getan in Europa als in den 10 Jahren davor.
Von der Leyen has also stated that €100 billion have been allocated for these joint projects to close defence gaps and strengthen capabilities. Additionally, she has stressed that 65% of the products must be procured from Europe or Ukraine rather than from abroad. Moreover, Mark Rutte has called for greater European responsibility, pointing to years of US complaints over Europe's defence spending. On the other hand, the German Foreign Minister Johann Wadeful has said that NATO remains vital for maintaining security at a time of global disruptions. Let's listen into their comments.
We had years, decades of complaints by the US about the fact that in Europe we were not spending enough on defense. That has changed with the summit in The Hague. The shift in mindset is that yesterday in the room what we felt, all of us, and there was a clear coming together of vision and of unity is Europe really stepping up. Europe taking more of a leadership role within NATO. Europe also taking more care of its own defense. And this is really a staggering change. And this will make NATO stronger. Because it means that a strong Europe in a strong NATO means that the transatlantic bond will be stronger than ever. Because we have dealt with that big irritant on the US side of Europe not doing the same as the Americans were doing.
More updates coming out of the 62nd Munich Security Conference. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has expressed concern over a growing gulf between Europe and the United States, citing the MAGA movement's culture wars as a major point of divergence. Merz referred a stimulus statement made a year ago by US Vice President J.D. Vance, where he acknowledged that a rift had indeed opened between the two allies. He emphasised that NATO membership provides a competitive advantage to both Europe and the United States and called for rebuilding and repairing transatlantic trust. Merz also warned of the increasing danger to freedom in today's era of superpower politics. He stated that in this new geopolitical landscape, the security of freedom is no longer guaranteed. The Chancellor stressed that NATO's nuclear sharing agreement remains vital to Europe's security and vowed that no zones of differing security will emerge on the continent. Joining us now is Alison Mutler, the former Associated Press Bureau Chief of Romania. She joins us live from Bucharest. Thank you so much, Alison, for joining us here on the broadcast. First of all, we've got a big conference ahead of us in Munich. It's going to, of course, get started with the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, who has spoke of this gulf between the United States and Europe. Do you really see those culture wars as being the core difference, the core sticking point when it comes to those divisions?
Well, I mean, he said a gulf. We could actually say rifts between the United States and its European allies. I think culture wars are definitely part of it. He mentioned MAGA, for example, and they are allied with Europe's far-right parties. But it's more than that. We're talking about Donald Trump's vision for a world in which there are the great powers. By this we mean the United States, China, and Russia. And they these great powers are the ones that decide, how the globe works. What deals are made. And in this regard, Europe is a junior partner, and also United States is a federal state with 50 states, whereas Europe is a large number of countries, some in the EU, some in NATO, some in neither. So I think that is perhaps what also he's alluding to, not just the cultural wars with MAGA allying with far-right parties in Europe, but also the fact that Donald Trump wants America to go it alone, and for America to be a great power in the world and do deals with other great powers to decide how if you like, how the globe is carved up, where areas of influence, who they're assigned to.
Indeed, and of course the issue of immigration consistently comes up. Those are those culture wars that Donald Trump is speaking about. What are your thoughts on that, the American stance towards that particular issue? Of course, we're not saying that it's not an issue. Particularly, it has seen the rise of far-right governments inside Europe. However, how the Americans have approached the issue and made it disrupt the relations between the two countries. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, yes, I think that's the word. It's been very disruptive. I mean, if you think of what happened in the last few weeks in Minnesota, and we had 2 people killed by ICE officers, and a very heavy-handed approach to so-called criminal aliens, as Donald Trump's administration calls them. And again, this trend for treating immigration as one of the huge problems faced in Western societies is something that the US wants to promote in Europe too. I mean, Donald Trump more than once has said the problem with Europe is allowing all this unfettered immigration. And there is, there is immigration, but that's how, the US is built on immigration. Countries need immigration for economic reasons. Where I live in Romania, there's a huge labor deficit. So, you do need migrants to move in and take in those jobs that Romanians don't fill. And that's true in other countries as well. Of course, there are countries like United Kingdom where it's a bit different, and there are people that go there and claim political asylum, and that is a very big political hot potato. But I think that Donald Trump and MAGA are aiming to create divisions in European societies by pushing this idea that immigration is killing their countries. And it is a problem, or it can be a problem, but it is also necessary for the economy to have migrants to do jobs. So it's very politicized. And of course, there are a lot of other issues we have in Europe, Russia's hybrid war. America, Donald Trump says absolutely nothing about that. He just pushes the immigration. And that is what the far right, that is what the MAGA is we need to get rid of immigrants and reclaim our countries, which is a very isolationist stance. And if you look around Europe, there's some countries, where I live, there aren't really very many immigrants. There are more than there used to be because of a labour deficit. But basically in Eastern Europe, you hear Orban being very anti-migration, but there's hardly any foreigners or migrants living there. So it's really inflated and polarised, and it's become a political issue, not a factual issue.
Indeed. Alison, do stay with us as we turn on to our next story. But first, let's in fact take a look at what the German Chancellor had to say in Munich.
In der Ära der Großmächte ist unsere Freiheit nicht mehr einfach so gegeben. Sie ist gefährdet. Wir halten uns dabei an unsere rechtlichen Verpflichtungen. Wir denken dies strikt eingebettet in unsere nukleare Teilhabe innerhalb der NATO. Und wir werden in Europa keine Zonen unterschiedlicher Sicherheit.
We move on now and back over to the US, where a story is developing once again. And in a recent televised interview, White House border czar Tom Homan confirmed that the large-scale federal immigration surge in Minnesota is ending, but enforcement operations will not stop. Homan said Operation Metro Surge, a massive ICE-led immigration enforcement deployment in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, is being wound down, with a significant drawdown already underway and expected to continue into next week. Despite the pullback of Surge Pacific personnel, Homan made it clear that ICE will maintain a presence in Minnesota and could return with additional resources if conditions change. Federal agents assigned to ongoing criminal and fraud investigations will remain until their work is complete. Homan said the surge met its objectives, making Minnesota less of a sanctuary for state criminals, and pointed to improved cooperation with local jails in harbouring ICE detainees as a key factor in drawn resources. Alison Mutler joins us once again to discuss the ongoing situation in Minnesota. Alison, the border czar there, Tom Homan, claiming that ICE isn't leaving Minnesota, but indeed things have changed, kind of pitching it as ICE has achieved its goal there, and is also saying that he will be prepared for more agents to go back in if situations, quote unquote, worsen. Looking now at this entire operation over the past around 2 months, how do you think this has impacted Donald Trump?
Well, it's what the border czar Tom Homan is saying is basically they're saving face, because the whole problem with this operation, it was very heavy-handed. There were deaths of protesters, and there were kind of armed ICE officers on the street, and it's impacted Donald Trump quite badly. And there are midterm elections later this year in the autumn, and I think Donald Trump realised that this heavy-handed approach, the violence on the street, the deaths on the street, was harming his popularity, which again then would translate into votes in the midterm elections. So it seems to me that this withdrawal, which tactical withdrawal for political reasons, but they are trying to save face, to say we've achieved our objectives. That's just because it's not politically expedient. It's not politically advantageous for ICE to stay there and to continue the way they have continued so far with armed officers on the streets and arresting people and violence and deaths. It was costing Donald Trump politically, his administration.
And leading into the midterms, of course, there are much fears for the Republicans, with polls when it comes to that not looking very good for the GOP. Given Donald Trump's broader immigration crackdown, not just focusing on Minneapolis, how do you think that the American people have received it? Of course, it's been focused on Democratic-run cities. You have the likes of Los Angeles, Illinois, others as well, with talks of ICE going into further Democratic-run cities, Chicago, New York, places like that. How has Donald Trump's ICE crackdown been pitted to the public?
Well, I think it's mixed. He has his hardcore MAGA base, who whatever he does will still support him. But then you have people, the floating voters. I'm not even talking about people who are opposed to Donald Trump. And they will have seen, it's quite clear that these ICE agents are being sent into, as you said, these democratic cities, cities that are controlled by the Democratic Party, i.e. the rivals of Donald Trump and the Republican Party. So although immigration, a lot of people would have agreed that immigration has been a problem in the United States in recent years, the way that Donald Trump has gone about it, both in the ferocity of the operations, but also sort of picking out states which he considers his enemies, I don't think has earned him, particularly amongst floating voters or people who aren't his hardcore fans. I think it has cost him quite a lot. And particularly with the midterm, as you said, elections coming up, he'll be concerned with that. That's why I think he stopped the Minnesota raids now, because we have quite a few months before elections, and he'll be hoping that there'll be economic good news and that people, by the time the midterm elections come around, let's just say October or November, people will have forgotten about it and it won't cost him as many votes. But obviously that depends what happens where else he deploys his troops, the federal troops. But it really, I think, basically overall, what happened in Minnesota with ICE did cost the Republican Party and did cost Donald Trump.
Alison, do stay with us one final time as we move over to another US update. And the government has filed a new lawsuit against Harvard University seeking to compel the institution to provide internal documents related to its admissions process. This legal move intensifies the ongoing dispute between Harvard and the federal government over compliance with anti-discrimination mandates and transparency requirements. The lawsuit focuses on Harvard's refusal to disclose comprehensive data on applicant pools and admitted students. The Department of Education had previously issued a denial of access letter, accusing Harvard of withholding information essential to determine compliance with Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. The legal battle is part of a broader series of tensions between Harvard and the federal government, including demands for a $1 billion settlement, restrictions on visas and funding, and investigations into foreign gifts and contracts. Harvard has argued that these actions infringe upon academic freedom and institutional autonomy. Alison joins us once again. Harvard once again facing pressure from the Trump administration. What do you make of this most recent development in this long-running saga between the Trump administration and Harvard University?
I think it's part of Donald Trump's wider goals related to what we were talking about before, the immigration, to crack down on anything that he considers is, any kind of foreign influence. He doesn't want immigrant students going there. He wants greater control. He considers universities such as Harvard, particularly Harvard, to be hostile to him. And as Harvard rightly said, why is the government trying to infringe on our academic freedoms and also our autonomy? They are generally a self-financing university. They're not relying on government funding. So what right does the government have to try and invade those freedoms and our privacy? So I think it's part of his broader goal on cracking down on institutes which he does not think sufficiently toe the line, and that definitely would include Harvard, which is the United States, probably the United States' top university.
Alison Muttler, thank you so much for taking the time. As always, it's a great pleasure to speak to you here on NewsX World. Thank you so much for joining us. We now turn back over to the US, and newly released documents from the Justice Department reveals Dr. Mehmet Oz's connections to convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. The documents show that in 2016, Oz, the administrator of the US Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services at the time, sent an invitation to Epstein for a Valentine's Day party. The email, dated on February the 1st of 2016, reportedly shows a link to a digital invite, although Oz is not accused of any wrongdoing in connection with Epstein's scandal. Further emails from 2016 and 2012 also mention Oz, including one where Epstein was invited to an event with Oz as a speaker. Oz has gained national fame as a cardiothoracic surgeon and the host of the Dr. Oz show, but is not connected to Epstein's criminal activities. Joining us now is Matthew Vadum. He's an American journalist. He joins us live from Washington. Thank you very much for joining us, Matthew. Great pleasure to talk to you.
Sure.
First of all, what more can you tell us about Dr. Oz? Of course, not just a man in government, but also someone who was a TV star before. How damaging is this?
Donald Trump sure loves TV stars, doesn't it? Doesn't he? He loves putting them in the cabinet and appointing them to positions. But in any event, yeah, this is damaging to Dr. Oz's reputation and to, I suppose, in an extended sense, the Trump administration. There's no proof of any wrongdoing, but it shows that Dr. Oz, like Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, had some kind of a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein after it was revealed that he was a sex offender. So, I know that some people are reluctant to abandon their friends when they get into legal trouble, but I think most people are turned off by the idea that, a high government official would continue to have a relationship with someone as odious as a sex offender. So yeah, this is damaging, and I think it just suggests that one of the reasons that President Trump didn't want, he campaigned on releasing the Epstein files, and then he did a 180-degree turn and said, no, we don't want to release them. And then he berated his own followers and said, we don't need this. And he pressured them and downplayed their concerns. But I think that driving this was the idea that when you release raw police files, raw FBI, raw Justice Department files, you make people who aren't necessarily involved in crimes look bad. You damage their reputations. And that's why it isn't normally done. The government can do it. Sometimes the government has to with FOIA, Freedom of Information Act requests. Here, to get the government to do it, Biden administration wouldn't do it. They had this access to the same files, and it required an act of Congress to force the Trump administration to release the documents. And it's unusual to release raw police files, and now we're seeing why. Now, this doesn't mean that Mehmet Oz and Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, are guilty or innocent of anything. It just shows that they had a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein that was more significant than previously publicly reported, and that in itself makes the Trump administration look bad.
Indeed, as you say, of course, Donald Trump himself had a relationship. We have Howard Lutnick and now Oz. These are three individuals in the current Trump administration. Do you see why people might want to know more information, and what steps do you think could possibly be taken in order to facilitate that for the American people? There is no doubt this is not the end of this situation, and this is probably going to spiral into something that we haven't seen before. But What are your thoughts on the fact that there's been no new prosecutions here as well?
Well, this is definitely not the end. Only 3 million documents have been released, and at the time, I, like many people, thought, well, that must be it. 3 million is a lot, but apparently they've located another 3 million, another 2.5 to 3 million other documents related to Epstein, and they're going to release them as well at some point. Though I think the DOJ, Department of Justice staff, is pretty overworked in going through them and redacting. This is going to continue to be a problem, and I'm not sure that the evidence that has emerged from the Epstein files so far is sufficient to base a prosecution on. And even if it weren't, the FBI and the Justice Department wouldn't necessarily tell the public, because they don't normally, except in, high-profile cases or certain circumstances, they generally don't disclose to the public that an investigation is ongoing. So I can see why people are frustrated, because they want justice to be done for Jeffrey Epstein's victims. He can no longer be punished since he killed himself in custody a few years back, or many people don't believe he killed himself. They think that someone else killed him, but that's unproven so far. Although his death is suspicious, it's just going to go on for a long time, and we're going to have to wait and see. I think that the frustrations among the administration were evident in Attorney General Pamela Bondi's freak out. I don't think it's inaccurate to call it that, at a congressional non-response, a deflection away from the question that she was asked, but you could tell she was really angry and resentful that she had to deal with this problem. But the problem has been put in her lap. She is the head of the Department of Justice, which is administering the ongoing disclosure of Epstein files, and so it's a problem she has to deal with, whether she likes it or not. So this problem isn't going away, and I wonder what other surprises are going to be discovered. A lot of people in the Trump administration and in high society and in the world of finance and media celebrities were involved with Jeffrey Epstein, and we're going to find out who they are soon, I'm sure.
Matthew Vadum, thank you so much for taking the time and joining us. Great to speak to you. We'll of course bring you all the updates coming out of that developing situation too. But we move back over to Europe. French President Emmanuel Macron has called for intensified efforts to combat anti-Semitism in France, highlighting a concerning trend despite a slight decline in reported incidents. Recent data from the Interior Ministry showed that anti-Semitic acts in 2025 still accounted for over 50% of all anti-religious incidents, with 1,320 recorded cases, although this marked a 16% decrease from the previous year. The figures remain historically high. Macron urged everyone, from schools to elected officials, to mobilize against the poison of online hatred and emphasized the need for accountability on big online platforms. Let's take a listen into his statements.
La lutte contre l'antisémitisme est le combat de chaque Français. Parce qu'on ne saurait effacer les Français juifs de la photo de famille de la République. Parce que lorsque dans la patrie, un juif est en danger, c'est la patrie elle-même qui est en danger. Pour lutter contre le poison de la haine numérique, la France demandera solennellement des comptes aux grandes plateformes et des résultats mesurables dans le retrait rapide des contenus.
We move on now. Storm Nils has caused widespread disruption across southern France, northern Spain and parts of Portugal. On Friday, around 450,000 homes in France were struck without power after the storm tore through the region, uprooting trees and flooding roads. Wind and heavy rains also led to flight and train cancellations. Tragically, a truck driver was killed in France when a tree fell on his vehicle, while numerous injuries were reported in Spain. In Portugal, flooding caused a viaduct to partially collapse. Let's listen into what a French cabinet minister has said on the matter.
On va d'abord faire un point sur la tempête Nils et ses conséquences. D'abord en ayant une pensée pour les proches des deux personnes qui sont décédées, pour les Français qui sont encore privés d'électricité et qui sont encore nombreux à cette heure. Pour vous dire qu'à date, on est à 83 départements qui sont placés en vigilance, dont 21 en vigilance orange pardon, et 2 en vigilance rouge. Et on est sur un phénomène qui est d'une ampleur exceptionnelle, tant par sa localisation géographique, puisque c'est quasiment l'ensemble du territoire qui est concerné, que par la durée du phénomène, de plus de 29 jours à présent. Vous dire également que la situation va rester préoccupante dans les prochains jours, compte tenu notamment de l'humidité des sols, compte tenu évidemment.
Well, that is all that we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news updates.